Welcome back to our next session in our Grove Discipleship series, where we're talking about what it means to be a fully devoted, world-changing follower of Jesus Christ. So last time we talked about the gospel and how it really begins with, I need to know that I'm a follower of Jesus Christ, which means I believe in who Jesus is, and I have received the gift. I have received His death on the cross for me. But what we don't want to happen is that you make this decision to receive Christ, and then you feel insecure about whether or not your relationship with God is safe. Because some people think, well, I can lose my salvation, and maybe I can be a child of God for a while, but then if I do something bad, then there's a problem. Or maybe not if I do one thing bad, but if I do a lot of things bad, if I stop going to church, if this, and then we can feel insecure. But the Bible says something very different. The Bible tells us that we can be completely secure, that once we are a child of God, we can know that we will remain a child of God forever. And the primary passage on this is in Romans chapter 8. And in Romans chapter 8, starting in verse 29, Paul says this: "For those that God foreknew, He also predestined to be conformed to the image of His Son, that He might be the firstborn among many brothers and sisters. And those He predestined, He also called, and those He called, He also justified. And those He justified, He also glorified. What then shall we say in response to these things? If God is for us, who can be against us? He who did not spare His own Son, but gave Him up for us all, how will He not also along with Him graciously give us all things?" And so what he's saying here, man, listen, if God's on your side, there's nothing, and there's nothing that can be against you if God's on your side. And then he's saying, if He gave you Jesus, how is He not also going to freely give you everything? Really talking about life with Him forever. And so then he begins, what happened at the very beginning of the passage, he describes, he's like, hey, there are some people out there that God foreknew. He foreknew them. He knew in advance that there were going to be some people that were going to become His followers. And so those people that He knew He were going to be His followers, it says that He predestined them. Now, don't get hung up on that right now. We can talk about predestination another time, but let's just move on. So He predestined them to become like Jesus. And it says that those ones that He predestined are also the ones that He called. And so He called them. It's like, hey, I want you to be my kids. And it says that the ones that He called are also the ones that He justified. And justified means to be made right with God. Like I'm now right with God. I was wrong, now I'm right. I'm in a good standing with God. So that's receiving the gospel. And it says that those that He justified, He also glorified, which is an expression that really talks about going to heaven. It means to be completely removed from sin, having sin no longer be a part of my life, no longer a part of the sinful world, but with God in heaven forever. And so what he's saying is there's a group of people that He knew about in advance. And everyone that He knew about in advance, He predestined. And everyone He predestined, He called. And everyone He called, He justified. And everyone He justified is glorified. So everyone that's justified gets to go to heaven. If you receive the gospel, you will definitely get to go to heaven. No one falls out. It doesn't say some. It doesn't say, well, if you work hard, if you do this right. Everyone that's justified, everyone who has truly received the gospel will be glorified. So if you have received the gospel, you can know this for sure. Let me illustrate it this way with a Venn diagram. I don't know if you know what Venn diagram, you got these little intersecting circles or whatever. So let's say that you're going over for someone's house for dinner, and when you get there, they say that everyone who comes for dinner gets dessert. So this is all the people, this represents all the people who are there for dinner. Well, everybody who's at dinner gets dessert. So if we say, who's everybody who gets dessert? Well, it's the same people who are there for dinner. The two groups are identical. You could also imagine a situation where it's like, okay, this is everybody who comes for dinner. Some people will eat their veggies, and some people will not. And if you don't eat your veggies, you don't get dessert. If you eat your veggies, you get dessert. So this is everybody who comes to dinner, but it's broken down into two parts. The people who get dessert because they eat their veggies, and the people who don't get dessert because they don't. This does not say that if you're justified and you do something right, or you avoid something wrong, or you are a good person, or whatever, then you'll get this. It doesn't say if you don't do certain things that you can lose it. What it says is everyone who comes to dinner will get dessert. And so if you are confident in knowing that I have received Christ into my life, you can be secure in that salvation and know that you will remain a child of God forever. So I encourage you to keep reading chapter 8. It keeps talking about some incredible things. He's just describing how there really is nothing in this world or the next, in the past, in the present, or the future. There is nothing that can separate you from the love of Christ. Nothing created, nothing not created, nothing. And so I encourage you to look at that, to keep discussing that, and talk about the implications of what it means for you if you can know for sure that your relationship with God is secure.